You requested it. It's finally here. Now, after weeks for waiting for things like the Senior Bowl, Combine, and the NFL free agency period to pass, I'm dropping my first mock draft, a 4-round mock, especially post free agency, to talk about how some of these players that are coming out in this year's draft can help improve the Panthers dramatically. Let's get into it. For our first pick at pick 19, I'm going to be going with Dylan Thieneman out of Oregon. Now, I've got to qualify this first because I did say something on Mint Street Mondays, shameless plug, about how I wanted a guy like Lathan Ransom to fill this spot. Well, guess what? I was dead wrong. Lathan Ransom is 100% a good safety, but he's a good safety in the same realm as like a Trayvon Morag, a guy who's good in run defense, a guy who loves the hit, playing closer to the box. What we need is someone who can be a ball hawk. Coming from Purdue, 6 interceptions. This guy was all over the place. Very instinctive player. 6 feet tall, kind of that perfect size for that safety. Just kind of the free runner, a guy who can just kind of diagnose things, see them and react in real time. Had a really high RAS score, done really well when he transferred to Oregon. Now, the interception numbers obviously went down. You're playing some extremely high-powered offenses compared to what you were playing in Purdue, but still, it was just amazing. If you're not getting picks, it's one thing, but also you got to think about pass breakups, tackles. Those are really important. But this guy's a very instinctual player, and I think that he can fill a really, really needed role with the Carolina Panthers, especially after they re-signed Nick Scott to kind of fill that position for now. This one is up for the taking. So I'm pretty comfortable with this pick right here. At one point, I thought about going in a different direction, but I really like this pick for the Panthers, and I think it could be a meaningful pick right away where he could be a day one starter even by competing in camp for this spot. So with the 51st pick in the second round, it's our guy, y'all, Jacob Rodriguez. Now, my belief is that Jacob Rodriguez is more than likely going to go in the first round, right? I think that there's traits that he has that are just going to be really attractive to some teams at the bottom of the first round who could take a flyer on a guy who doesn't have prototypical size but has beyond prototypical traits, right? Tons of forced fumbles, interceptions. This guy's the entire package. And if he was about 6'3", 6'4", there's a good chance that he'd be right up there with the Sonny Styles of the world or the Arvell Reese, depending on where he's going to play coming in from Ohio State. But yet and still, I think Jacob Rodriguez is going to be a high-level talent for some team. I'm hoping that team is us. If he's there at 51, I have a really hard time believing that they're going to pass on him at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and mock Jacob Rodriguez for our second-round pick at pick 51. Now, there is a possibility, maybe, that if they love this guy enough, maybe they move up a little bit. Because like I said, I think he's going to go in the first round. But I could be wrong because most consensus, as I mentioned, have him kind of in that high second to lower, or I say mid second round pick. So Dan could get really aggressive. We've seen Dan be really aggressive in this free agency period. So it stands to reason that with 2 fifth-round picks, you can kind of package some things together, move up a little bit to get your guy if this is indeed your guy and he's still on the board. But for the One Carolina faithful, you know this is definitely our guy. So I got Jacob Rodriguez here in the second round. For our third round pick here, we're going to go with center Sam Hecht from Kansas State. Now, Sam Hecht is a guy who's very intriguing, right? Because some people suggest that he could go as high as the second round when most consensus has him around the third round. Well, we're going to take him here. And the reason is pretty simple. We signed Luke Fortner on a 1-year deal after losing Cade Mays in free agency. That 1-year deal is going to be a 1-year rental maybe, or potentially an opportunity for a long-term future. But he is an older veteran, so it stands to reason that for this draft, you would want to bring someone in that guy can develop and eventually take over that position. And now you've got a cheaper contract with a guy that you've developed for a year and maybe even gets an opportunity to play this season. This guy during his college career never gave up a sack, which is crazy, right? The main thing is consistency. He's always available. First team Big 12 in his conference, all Big 12, I should say. And I mean, just a really solid guy at his size, I think 6'4"-ish, over 300 pounds. There's another center that I really liked from Alabama. That was a guy that's played some high-level football. But I think Sam Hecht is a guy that you can bring in, could be a day one starter. In a zone scheme, could look really well. A guy that you can bring in and just develop. So this is one I'm pretty strong on right here in the third round. Now, there were other options, and obviously there's other needs that you have, but I think the center position definitely needs to be addressed because if you lose Luke Fortner for any reason, like we saw last year with all the variations of offensive linemen that we've had in the past, And considering that you had Austin Corbett at one point, Cade Mays at one point, and just vice versa, you want to make sure to have somebody that you can have available to you in the event of an injury and also from a developmental perspective. So Sam Hecht it is at the 3rd round pick. Let's keep it moving. And for our 4th round selection, we're going to go with Dalen Everett out of Georgia. Now, this is one of those picks that can go either way. I'm sure there's some corners from other places that people may like. But one thing I've noticed that's been a pattern with Dan Morgan as of late, drafting guys in the SEC. This is one of those opportunities like, for example, Keely Ringo getting picked a few years ago from Georgia to the Philadelphia Eagles. Sometimes when these guys don't have like super high level stats, he had 1 interception, right? 10 pass breakups, but he played in a very tough conference and played well. Some people think he could go a little bit higher than this point in the draft, but at the 4th round, I'm going to take him here because he's got championship level, right? As far as his makeup is concerned, he's played in a very tough conference, and he kind of has that length that you look for with the Ejiro Evero and the Carolina Panther corners, JC, Mike Jackson, Corey Thornton, all these guys being over 6 feet. So this is another guy that you can bring in that kind of has that same pedigree. I do think that one of the positions that'll be interesting to watch this year is what they do at the nickel spot, right? Shao Smith-Wade being one of those smaller corners that we have out there. Corey Thornton kind of taking, some of that role, earlier in this year, or this past season, I should say. And this is a guy who maybe can transition into a role like that as well, or just be a safety backup net for a guy like Mike Jackson going down with injury, a guy that you can develop. I know that there's been a lot of talk about Mike Jackson's contract as of late and whether or not you're going to extend him, after next year. And so maybe you get a guy like this that you can bring in and develop to take that place if necessary, even though I probably would lean more in the camp of hoping that Mike Jack has another great season so that you can extend him so that he's here for the long term. Because I do like the J.C. Horn and Mike Jack tandem. I do think it's something that we have special going here. And, you like to see that continuity. But Dave Canales also comes from a place where Richard Sherman was a cornerback for a long time, and they had guys like Brandon Browner and Byron Maxwell and, and so on and so forth. So that secondary spot of corner, like you kept your main one there, which I think obviously J.C. Horn's going to be our guy that we keep, for the long term. But you did kind of, turn, that other side of the field quite often as far as like putting in a new corner and they didn't really lose a step, right? So I feel like this is a guy from a length perspective and a potential developmental perspective that you can bring in and plug into that spot the same way. And if not, then obviously you can go back to the drawing board. But I like him here. I think this is someone, like I said, that comes from Georgia, brings a high level of awareness and, a toughness, because you have to be tough to play with a team like Georgia, playing in that conference, knowing that everybody has you circled every single year because you've become effectively the new Alabama of the conference, right? So for him to play this well, start at 12 games this year, this is a guy that I would like to see come in and be able to compete for the job moving forward, because you're going to be competing with guys like Corey Thornton. And like I said, even someone like a Shao Smith-Wade competing for reps in training camp and things like that. So it'll be a pretty fun thing to watch. But we're going to go with Dalen Everett right here at the 4th round pick. So that keeps it pretty simple. From 1 to 4, Dylan Thieneman, Jacob Rodriguez, Sam Hecht, and Dalen Everett, ending the first draft, the first 4-round mock draft of the one Carolina season. Now, there are plenty of different ways that you can go here, right? And I know I'm not going to have the best mock draft, and I'm sure to some people it's going to be the absolute worst. But the thing is that you're just mocking things that you see that could be potential needs. The one thing that I love about what free agency has provided, especially at that first pick at 19, you can go any direction you want, right? Some people would really love a guy like Kenyon Sadiq. He would offer an explosion to the offense that you really don't have right now, especially at the tight end position. You got a lot of tight ends in the building, but nobody's kind of just like strong arm and took the job. I believe a guy like Kenyon Sadiq would definitely do that. You've got another safety, for example. There was a mock that had us taking Emmanuel McNeil-Warren from Toledo. Another tall guy, taller than Dylan Thieneman, just an absolute explosive athlete, right? So there's another guy there as well. You're going to have plenty of opportunity to draft an offensive lineman if you want to do that. I think you kind of covered that when you went out and got Walker from the Packers, so you don't really have to fill that spot right away. So you get that 1 year, $10 million rental, or potentially a long-term deal for him or Icky. So you don't really have to rush to get a guy that you don't really believe in. And now you really can go BPA. And there's plenty of BPA out there. Denzel Boston for some people they're going to like. A guy like Jordan Tyson, I highly doubt that he would fall this far. Almost certain he would not. But if he's there at 19, as Dan said before, if a receiver's there, we're going to take a receiver. So regardless how this shapes out, you've got plenty of options because of the great work that Dan Morgan, Brant Tillis, and company have done to secure a absolute meaningful and will probably be one of the best free agent periods that we've had in our team's history. But let me know what you think below. Comment below who you would like to see us draft. Like I said, this is the first of a few drafts that we're going to do on the One Carolina channel. I'll be linking up with some of my favorite creators, some of your favorite creators as well, people who've been on the channel before, to get their expertise and their thoughts on who they would draft. But make sure to like this video, hype this video, and I'll see you on the next upload. Until then, it's John Farmer from the One Carolina Show. Keep pounding.